Hi guys, my name is Natalia and welcome back to my channel. So today I will be tier ranking all the fantasy books I have read for like the past 3 years or so. I'm not going to rank books that I read even before that because I think I just don't remember them well enough and it just wouldn't be fair to these books to rank them. But here on my list that I created, we've got 35 books, which I think is quite a substantial amount. Quite some time ago, I did tier rank thriller mysteries that I've read, and I saw that that video was received quite well. So I thought, why not rank some fantasy books as well? I do like these types of videos. They are fun, although I do have to remind you that these are just my own personal opinions, and obviously you can have your own opinion that is different, but please at least be respectful about it. Because I do try to be respectful even about the books that I didn't like. And I know that there will be people out there that will like these books or that have read and have liked these books, and it's just my own personal opinion. But anyway, let's look at the tiers that I made. The first one is all-time favorite. So obviously these are the books that just live in my head all the time. Think about them all the time. I would die to be able to read them for the first time again. And these are just books that I love dearly with my whole heart. Next we've got Loved It. So maybe these are not my favorites, but I still really enjoyed them and would highly recommend them, and they had many strong aspects. Next is Fun Time But Nothing Special. So these are books that I had fun reading them, and I thought like they were pretty good, but like they were nothing special. It was not spectacular. They did have some minor flaws, but I enjoyed them anyway. Next is Had Potential But Didn't Deliver. So these are books that I thought would be very good if they were executed differently. Like, let's say the idea is very good, or the setting is interesting, but just something didn't really quite work for me, and I ended up not really enjoying these books. And the last one is Not My Cup of Tea. Honestly, I'm not sure if I will put a lot of books in this one, but yeah, these are books that just in general I didn't enjoy personally. Just they were not my style. Okay, so these are all the tiers that I made, and now let's get started. So the order of these books is quite random, but anyway, let's start with the first one that I see, which is Angel Fall by Susan E. It is post-apocalyptic fantasy novel about a world that is ruled by ruthless angels. It is a trilogy, and the first book, I'm going to say loved it. I really think it was a very well-written book. It was really engaging, really fast-paced, a little dark, but I really loved reading it so much. And I definitely wish this book got more recognition. I just don't really feel like enough people talk about it. Like, yeah, it is not a recent book, but I still think it deserves some more hype. You know, I love this book so much. It also has romance in it, but it's like really slow burn. Like, it's really slow. So if you like slow burn romance, you should give this one a go. And then we've got the second book in the same trilogy, which is World After. For this one, I'm gonna say Fun Time But Nothing Special. I think this was my least favorite book in this trilogy. I don't know, maybe it just didn't have enough of Ruffy, which is the angel that our protagonist will end up like working with and falling in love with and all of that. We just didn't get to see him that much. I felt like it dragged a little bit, especially compared to the first book. So I still had a good time reading it, but it just was not as good as the first book. And then we've got the last book. And I think I will say I loved it as well. I thought it was a really nice conclusion to this trilogy. It was really action packed and really fast paced, and just in general, I really enjoyed this trilogy. So, next we've got the Ballad of Never After, but maybe let's start with the first book, which is Once Upon a Broken Heart. So, it is a trilogy that I actually read very recently, and I would say the first book and the second book in this trilogy are my all-time favorites. The world that is built in these books is so magical and whimsical. It is the same world as in the Caraval series, which also is on this list, so we will rank it a bit later. But I did think that maybe the Once Upon a Broken Heart plot was a little less confusing than the Caraval one. The Caraval one was a bit twisted because it was all about this game that mixed illusion with reality. It was quite a lot to comprehend. I feel like the plot for Once Upon a Broken Heart is a lot easier to understand and a lot less twisty. And I do feel like the characters are a bit more interesting. I love Jax. I love his witty remarks. I love his sense of humor. You know, I love that he's so unpredictable and morally ambiguous. I also like Evangeline, and she's not your typical fantasy protagonist. Majority of the female protagonists in fantasy books are these badass women that are very strong and very resilient and powerful. And I'm not saying that Evangeline is weak, she's not, but it's just she has this very soft and feminine energy to her. And actually, I do really like that. I think she's cute. I don't think she's weak at all. She is definitely strong. Maybe she's not the strongest when it comes to physical strength, but she is, you know, definitely resilient and strong mentally. So I love this trilogy. But let's talk about the last book in this trilogy. Where is it? Yeah, it's here. A Curse for True Love. I will say I loved it. It was definitely my least favorite book in this trilogy. I still loved it. It's just, I felt like the ending was a little bit rushed. I really wanted to have some more moments of Effie and Jax being just openly and joyfully in love, and we didn't really get that many moments, so I was a bit disappointed. Like I said, the ending felt rushed, and I felt like maybe the first half of the book was dragging a little bit. Maybe it's because we also had some chapters that were written from Apollo's point of view, and if you read this series, you know we do not like Apollo. So reading his chapters was really excruciating. I know that his chapters were written to like fill in certain gaps in the story, but nonetheless I did not enjoy his chapters. Anyway, it was still an enjoyable read and a nice conclusion to this trilogy. Next, we've got, oh my god, Six of Crows, all-time favorite, and the same goes for Crooked Kingdom, which is the second book. So, Six of Crows is a duology written by Leigh Bardugo, and it basically talks about these 6 outcasts that come together and they go on a heist. It has very strong found family trope. Honestly, the characters that Leigh Bardugo wrote are some of the best characters I've ever read about. All of them are so unique and so distinctive. The plot for these books is really intense, really action-packed. Okay, next up we've got Dance of Thieves, and this is a duology that I did not finish. I read the first book. It's actually been quite some time since I read it, but I would say it had potential but didn't deliver. I did think the plot was interesting, but I thought it was definitely way too long. It was dragging a little bit, and literally none of the characters felt distinctive in any way. I honestly kept confusing the characters with each other. Some of the characters just felt like one character, like nothing really felt distinctive about them. So the romance part, I liked it at first, but I felt like it escalated a bit too quickly for my liking, and after that I just didn't really like it anymore. So I feel like it did have potential and it was not a terrible read. I know some people would enjoy it, but I personally didn't really like it. Next, we've got Studying Drowning, my all-time favorite. Honestly, I love this book so much. It is a dark academia fantasy novel with a mystery in it. I love the haunting and eerie atmosphere that this book has. I love the main characters. Effie and Preston are just my comfort characters. I love them so much and I love their relationship. It is kind of like a rivals to lovers love story, but I love it so much. I love the mystery too. It was really intense. And honestly, just Effie feels like a very relatable character to me. Just a lot of her thought processes were similar to mine. So I don't know. I think I just like her so much because I think she and I are a bit similar in some ways. And there's a sequel coming out this year, I believe in August, so I'm very excited to read it. Next, we've got Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. I actually read it twice. I read it for the first time a few years ago and I loved it, and then I wanted to reread it to see if I still like it, and I still do like it. So I think it's my all-time favorite. It is like a magical school setting, and we've got an enemies to lovers trope. Honestly, I feel like the characters are what really carry this story. The plot is interesting as well, but I don't think the plot itself could save this book. I think it's really the characters, the atmosphere, just the comfort that this book brings me and these characters bring me. It's crazy. And it is actually a trilogy, though. I have not read all the 3 books, but I did read the second one. And actually, the second one was a little bit of a disappointment. I will say I had a fun time, but it was nothing special. As much as I still love these characters, I felt like they were acting a bit out of character. They just felt like some watered down versions of themselves, especially compared to the first book. There was also quite a lot of miscommunication, which was a little frustrating. The plot also was not that interesting. I still had fun reading it, but the idea for the plot was really, I don't know, it just felt like the author was just like coming up with whatever came to her head, and it didn't have like a very solid planning. But still, Simon and Baz's relationship was my highlight. It still had some really funny and cute moments, so I still enjoyed it, but I just don't think that it was anything spectacular. Next, we've got The Stolen Heir by Holly Black. I will say fun time, but nothing special. I'm not sure if it's a duology or a series. I know there's a second book for sure because I'm planning to read it. It is a book that is set in the same world as the Folk of the Air trilogy, which I will also rank. As much as I love the Folk of the Air trilogy, this one didn't make that much of an impression on me. Like, I still enjoyed it. I love Holly Black's writing. It's so magical and immersive. I just didn't really feel like this book was super memorable to me. I definitely enjoyed getting to know Soren and Oak more than we did in the original trilogy. I do like them, but I just don't feel like the other characters or the plot were that memorable to me. I forgot about it pretty quickly and I just didn't obsess over it. But I still think it's a solid read and I still, had a good time reading it. Next we've got Ninth House, and I'm not sure, it might be a little controversial, but I will say it had potential but didn't deliver. I did like the writing style. I mean, I like Leigh Bardugo's writing style in general. I do think the idea for the book was interesting. It is a dark academia book that talks about secret societies, but I definitely had a hard time, especially at first, getting to understand the world. It felt a bit confusing to me. Also, the characters were not really memorable. I literally didn't like any of the characters, and I didn't really root for them or anything. Especially after reading Six of Crows by the same author and falling in love with the amazing world and the intriguing, interesting characters. This felt like the complete opposite, and the characters were not unique or memorable at all, at least to me. So yeah, that's my opinion on Ninth House. Next, we've got The Court of Mist and Fury. No, let's start with the first book in this series, which is A Court of Thorns and Roses. This one will also be a little bit unpopular, I guess. I would say just I had a fun time, but it was nothing special. Definitely do like the world building. I do think that Sarah is really good at building this magical fantasy worlds. I definitely feel like the first part was dragging, and it did pick up the pace at the end a little bit, but yeah, all of these books are really thick and really long. I did like the characters. I'm not sure if I loved them, but I had fun reading about them. I definitely felt like the ending was not like that shocking, or maybe it's just my expectations might have been too high because of how hyped this book is, but I just didn't find the plot gripping enough to say that I loved it. And then we go to the second book, A Court of Mist and Fury, which is a book that a lot of people say is their favorite in this series. And I don't know, it's had potential but didn't deliver. I don't know, I'm really torn between these two tiers. I don't think it was terrible, but I really didn't enjoy it. And it was after I finished this book that I decided that I do not want to continue this series. I know I said that I liked the characters in A Court of Thorns and Roses. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really feel that captivated by the characters in A Court of Mist and Fury. I thought it was way too long, and honestly, I remember just thinking I will never be able to finish this book because of how slow it felt. The last 100 pages or so were really action-packed and gripping, and that was actually the only time when I actually had fun while reading this book. I don't even feel that attached to the characters, not even Rysand. I know he's very loved character in the book community, and I'm not coming for him. I'm not saying I do not have anything against him, but he didn't really blow me away. Just like this series didn't really blow me away. I still want to pick up Throne of Glass series. I think I'd enjoy that one more, but we'll see. For now, yeah, I was not a huge fan of this series. Next, we've got Divine Rivals, and that one is my all-time favorite. And same goes for the sequel, which is Ruthless Vows. I love Rebecca Ross's writing. It's so poetic and touching and so beautiful. I love this entire story, especially love story between Roman and Iris. It's the type of book series that made me cry, laugh, smile, ponder, made me, giggle and kick my feet. I just felt such an array of different emotions, and I think about this book regularly. I love it, and I will never ever stop recommending this duology. Next, we've got Belladonna. I'm going to say had potential but didn't deliver. I was really excited to pick up this book because I loved the premise. It is a fantasy novel with gothic elements in it and talks about a girl that cannot die, and she can also see ghosts and spirits, and she can even see death himself. So I thought that is such an interesting premise. I was so excited to pick it up, and while I did like the atmosphere and the mystery part, I really hated the characters, especially the character of Death. I just felt he was so bland, like a piece of stale bread. Not what I was expecting at all. I also did not like the romance. Just felt like they became obsessed with each other way too quickly. It felt too instant. It felt a little bit creepy. And he also has this like ability to transform into a shadow form, and they were doing some intimate things while he was in this shadow form, and that was the weirdest scene I've ever read. I was so uncomfortable. I don't know. I decided not to continue this series. It is a trilogy, I believe, but I just didn't like it. I didn't like the characters. I did not like the romance. The plot did save it, I will say that, and I know that there are definitely people out there that will enjoy this book. It's not objectively terrible, but it's just subjectively I did not enjoy it. Okay, next we've got the second book in the Folk of the Air trilogy. So maybe let's start with ranking the first book, which is The Cruel Prince. And actually, all three books in this trilogy can go to all-time favorites. I still think that The Queen of Nothing is the best one for sure. I feel like each book in this series just gets better, but I do think that all of them are good enough to be called my favorites. It is a very popular series about this human girl that is forced to grow up in a fae world. And you know, it's not easy because she is discriminated against since she is a human. She just has to deal with a lot of hardships, but she is very strong. She's really such an empowering character. I love Jude so much. She's one of my favorite characters of all time. I love the enemies to lovers and slow burn romance. It was so well written. I love the political intrigue in this series. It's honestly such an action-packed and thrilling series, and it will always have a special place in my heart. Next, we've got The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. I will say I loved it. I don't want to say it's my all-time favorite, but it's very close to it. It is a cozy fantasy. It talks about this modern-day witch named Mika, who will end up being like a tutor of magic to three little girls that do not know how to control their magic yet. It has a very touching, heartwarming family trope that I love, and honestly, just seeing Mika going from being someone that feels isolated, feel like she does not really belong anywhere, to finding her people, to finding people who love her and care about her, it was so touching, and it's such a beautiful story. And even though I'm not a huge fan of cozy fantasies, this one is the exception, and I will always recommend this book. Next, we've got House of Hollow, and I'm torn between loved it and all-time favorite. Let's say loved it. I did give it 5 stars, so honestly could go to all-time favorites, but I just feel like the books that I put up here, they just, I don't know, I feel something special about them, which maybe I don't feel about this book, but I still think it's an excellent book. It's actually a fantasy with horror elements, but it's YA, so it's not like super graphic or super dark. I mean, it is a bit dark, it is a horror after all. There's a lot of talk of rotting baddies and decay and all of that, but I still thought it was such an eerie and haunting story and such a chilling mystery. It talks about 3 girls that disappeared as children only to return with no memories of what happened, and they also came back with some like changes to their appearance, and they have some like strange uncanny abilities. Once they are adults, one of the sisters goes missing again, and the other 2 sisters are investigating her disappearance, and you know, they slowly start to investigate what happened to them when they were children, because it turns out it's connected. I was really shocked at the plot twist. Honestly, the atmosphere was so chilling. There were a few scenes that genuinely made me scared. Like I had to pause reading because I was so scared. I was like looking over my shoulder just to make sure that no one is behind me. I was so spooked. I thought it's such a well-written book, and the plot twists were honestly crazy. And if you do like kind of like dark spooky reads, then definitely you should go and check this one out. Next, we've got How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories. I would say I loved it. It is like an additional book to the Folk of the Air trilogy. It has a lot of illustrations in it. We just, get to see a bit more of the characters. There are also some chapters from Cardan's point of view, which I loved because in the trilogy we didn't get Cardan's point of view, so I loved it. I definitely don't think it's a book you need to read, but if you loved the Folk of the Air trilogy, then it's definitely worth picking it up. Next, we've got the Caraval trilogy. So the first book is Caraval, and I will say it's my all-time favorite. And then we've got these next two books, which is Legendary and Finale, and I will say I loved them, but they were not my favorite. So you might be wondering, why is Caraval my favorite and the other two are not? We actually kind of change protagonists throughout this series, which honestly I don't love the idea. Now that I think about it, it's very tricky to suddenly change protagonists midway series, and different people have different opinions about it. So in the first book, Caraval, the protagonist is Scarlet, and then in the second book, the protagonist is Donatella, who is her sister, and in the finale it's kind of like both of them interchangeably are the protagonists. But yeah, I personally am a huge fan of Scarlet. Don't necessarily have anything against Donatella, but I just don't find her as interesting. Same with the romance. Scarlet and Julian's romance is one of my favorite book romances of all time. I love them together so much, and I really wish we could see more of their relationship. But after Caraval, we didn't get to see much of their relationship, which is really a shame. But nonetheless, I still think that Legendary and Finale were excellent books. They were really whimsical, magical, and action-packed. And I still love them, but just not as much as I loved Caraval. Caraval will always be my number one. So since we are in this series, let's also rate Spectacular. I will say fun time, but nothing special. It is just an additional novella that is Christmas themed. But once again, there was not much of Scarlet and Julian. It was mainly just Donatella and a Legend. But I did like the illustrations. They were really pretty. I just thought it was a really cute and nice read that helped me get in the Christmas spirit. But definitely it was nothing spectacular. And it's funny because the title is spectacular, but I don't think it was spectacular. Next we've got Serpent and Dove. I will say not my cup of tea. Honestly, probably one of the least appealing fantasy books I've ever read. It is a trilogy, but I decided not to continue it. It talks about like witches, so we've got this witch and this witch hunter, and they are forced to get married. And honestly, I just felt like the magic system was a bit underdeveloped. There was no chemistry between the main characters. Honestly, I don't really think any of the characters were interesting. There were some moments that I remember made me cringe so hard. Like, I cannot give you an example right now, but I just remember cringing really hard. I suppose these scenes were meant to be funny, but they just ended up being cringy. So overall, I don't think it's the worst book ever, but it was definitely not what I expected. If I were to say some positive aspects, I think it was quite well paced. It wasn't like super boring, but once again, I didn't really feel that excited reading this book. Next, we've got Slowfoot, which is another witchy read. I think I would say I loved it. It definitely has a very strong theme of female empowerment. So it is a historical fiction that's set in like 1666, and we follow a woman named Abitha who has recently lost her husband, and now she's trying to survive on her own. Like, she is expected to, go and find a new husband, but she just does not really want to do that. She definitely does not like all the restrictions that are put on women in the Puritan societies, because she does live in a Puritan society. So she's trying to fight that. Honestly, everyone just does not like her because, she's trying to just live by her own rules. I guess you could say she's a bit rebellious. So obviously other people in the community do not like her. They are really against her. But she will end up getting some help from this mythical creature that wakes in the forest. It is a very dark and a little graphic novel. I will admit there was one scene that really made me want to throw up. I guess go check the trigger warnings before you read it, because maybe I should have. I cannot say it was a bad book because it was really atmospheric and it was so empowering. And Abitha, she's such a strong and resilient character. Honestly, one of my favorite protagonists of all time. I do recommend this book, but maybe not for everyone. Like, if you're really squeamish, I don't think that you should read it. But if you're okay with some darkness and some graphic details, then you should give it a try. Next, we've got Fourth Wing. Oh my god, I don't know. I liked it. Let's say I loved it. Okay. Should I say fun time but nothing special? Okay. I'm like torn between these two, but maybe let's say I loved it. Okay, let's say fun time but nothing special. I did like the setting. I definitely think it felt a bit too long. It was dragging at certain points. I did not necessarily love the writing style. I felt the dialogue was a bit too modern for the setting. At least that's how I felt. I do love the protagonist, but being in her head was a little tiresome, especially like after she fell for Xaden. Some of her reactions were so over the top. Like, I don't know, I thought it was a bit ridiculous. Like, I still think this book has some really strong aspects, especially the dragons. I love the rider-dragon bonding system. I thought it was awesome. I do love the dragons. I love that they have their own personalities. I also liked many of the characters. So overall, it is not a bad series and I will continue it, but it's just, I'm not sure if it's worth all the hype, because obviously it got so much hype, but I still think there are books that were a bit better. But like I said, I still enjoyed it. Okay, lastly, we've got 3 books from the Vampire Academy series. Actually, I did read the entire series, and this series has 6 books, but I only reread 3 of them. So I will only rank these 3. I don't want to rank the last 3 books because I think I still need to reread them before I can give my opinion on them. I will say the first one is fun time but nothing special, and then the second and third I loved. The first book, after I reread it, I definitely realized that, okay, it's not as good as I had originally thought when I first read it as a teenager. Because when I first read it, I was obsessed. This was the masterpiece to me. So now I was like, okay, it's not a masterpiece. But I still enjoyed it. It was still such a fun read, and I love the characters. Maybe I just feel nostalgic about this entire world and all of these characters, because it used to be my favorite series as a teenager. I think definitely the second book and the third book were a bit better. Like, the author really stepped up with the interesting plotline and everything. So I put them in. I loved it. But yeah, the first one, it was not that great, honestly. But I still had so much fun reading it. Maybe it's like my guilty pleasure series or whatever you want to call it. Here's my final ranking of all the fantasy books that I've read. I think I'm pretty satisfied with the ranking. I think it's pretty accurate. Obviously, like I said, it's just my own personal opinion. I think that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like it and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.